Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bearing with me. This does not have gears and pulleys and I do not know what to do with it. So I'm trying my best. This is my first time hosting presentations. So we're having fun. It's great. What? I did. Yeah. Thank you to all of my wonderful support staff as well. I have no idea if we're recording. Everyone's here for me. Thank you so much. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone here in person and on Zoom for being here. We're going to have a lot of fun. So here's how things go. We're going to have all of our awesome instructors who are here this week come up and do 10-minute presentations. At 10 minutes, I will very kindly let them know that they are at 10 minutes, and then they can wrap up. And they are going to be introduced by the studio assistants in their workshop. So it's actually a lot of fun. Yeah, we're going to get started. Now you get to see this cute picture of the summer crew. Wonderful. All right. First up, we have Lucy Derickson in the Fine Metals studio. And to assist her, we have the assistant, Maddie Meyer.
Hey everybody, so I'm Maddie Meyer and I am the assistant in Fine Metals, and I'm going to be introducing Lucy Derickson, who is currently teaching the class Pewter, I Hardly Know Her. So Lucy is an artist, metalsmith, and educator residing in Washington, D.C. She is currently the coordinator of the jewelry and metalsmithing and crafts area at Montgomery College in Rockville, Maryland, and is a board member of the nonprofit organization Ethical Metalsmiths, where she works as the facilitator to EM students. Having received her BFA in jewelry and metalsmithing, along with a teaching certification from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, Lucy taught K through 12 art for 2 years. She then received her MFA from Virginia Commonwealth University in the Department of Craft and Material Studies. So please give me a warm welcome and help me in giving you a warm welcome to Lucy.
Okay, hi everyone. As Maddie said, so I've been in DC for a while and I'm the coordinator of a metals/craft program there. Oops, how do I go to the next slide? I got to dig. There we go. And then I wanted to just start by talking a little bit about my work with Ethical Metalsmiths. It's a volunteer-run organization whose mission is to inspire responsible jewelry practices through education, connection, and action. We envision a world where a beautiful product does not bear a human or environmental toll. EM has worked to ensure that there are suppliers that work entirely in fair mined and recycled gold and silver, and is also responsible for organizing the importing of the very first kilo of fair mined gold to the US, which was in 2013, which to me is not very long ago, if you think about that, the actual first kilo of fair mined gold to the United States. So my work with EM started during graduate school at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. And when I started the first chapter of EM students, the student chapter of Ethical Metalsmiths. And we created So Fresh, So Clean, which is a juried online student exhibition. And we gave away up to a little over $1,700 in awards just that first year and have continued to do so. The show gives students an opportunity to see their work through the lens of sustainability and responsibility, and they are rewarded for their efforts with some money, right? Students need money. The show is currently in its 8th cycle and continues to be juried and designed by the students at VCU. And I'm also excited to announce a new project that I'm working on in collaboration with Wellness for Makers. It's called Critical Smiths. And we're asking schools around the world to commit to a semester-long or a year-long research project. And we've had 2 installments so far. So Flux was one, Jewelry Pickle was the other. And really these projects have just kind of started more questions that we want the next groups to sort of pick up and carry the torch forward with some more answers. I wanted to mention EM and the volunteer work I do with that organization, because to me, it feels sort of like my current series of work. I haven't really done a lot of studio works. It's kind of like taken over that aspect of my life. And sometimes that's awesome, and sometimes, you know, it's a lot. But so moving to my studio work, I'm inspired by the unusual connections that we have to objects through the lens of the human experience, and specifically our human tendency to retreat to objects, allowing them to mediate experiences between people. I'm also very interested in how technology plays a role in that phenomenon. And then while curating this presentation for you, I couldn't help but think about my work through the lens of this pandemic. And so I chose work that I thought kind of fit that, like I could kind of make it fit into that topic. So this piece, like the last image, goes back to my undergrad work. I often created goblets or vessels that presented challenges for the users. These vessels are bound together by 3 feet of latex tubing, which is a total of 6 feet across. I used latex cord to connect the vessels in order to force the group of people to interact, or at least not walk away from each other. However, now I can't help but think about it as this way to keep people 6 feet apart from one another. So it's like kind of completely flipped. It'll probably go back in a few years to its original. So moving forward a few years, so Sherry Turkle has posed the question, what is it about modern community that has so taxed us that we sometimes prefer to reconstitute it through machines? And in the midst of this pandemic, I might answer that question differently than I have in the past, but I created this next series while pondering this question. My surrogate devices are designed to provoke memory by aiding the sense. By engaging the olfactory system, this series strips away the need for the person and replaces their essence with a device. The Smell of Him, 1987 through 2001, recreates the scent of my father as I remember it from this specific time period. It's a mix of cigarettes and the cough drops that he used to mask the evidence of his habit. When I imagine my dad specifically from this time period, it would be the profile view of him at the wheel of his bright red work truck while I sat passenger. So for the device to work, I need to have the smell of cigarettes. And since I'm not a smoker, I need to harvest this component by other means, including finding butts on the ground. You'll see the device is also equipped with a eucalyptus menthol hull dispenser, a basket to hold the cough drop, and then a container of water to allow it to steep for just a short while, which is going to activate the smell of the cough drop. Once the cough drop and the cigarette butt are in place, the fan is turned on and I can then sit and smell the mixture of the two. The Best Smell, 1986 through 1992, also emits one of my most potent smell associations. This piece stores and expels the smell of laundry. It contains vintage dryer sheets that my mother used when I was young enough to be delighted by these mysterious scented foam squares that were always hidden in my clothes. Upon finding the treasure, I would store them in a secret place where I would often return for another whiff. Over time, the smell would fade and I would patiently wait for the next one to show up. These last two devices are physical stand-ins for two people that I love dearly, my mom and my dad. And in these objects, I find comfort. These smell associations transport me immediately and vividly back in time. But when I think of them in the context of this pandemic, these devices allowed me to visit people who I was unable to visit otherwise. In the same sense, these two pieces will transform again when the time comes that my parents are no longer living. So moving along, devices for a first date. So again, Sherry Turkle, we look to technology for ways to be in a relationship and to protect ourselves from them at the same time. And I can't help but agree with Sherry Turkle on this one because I did just turn my parents into objects, right? So again, when considering a pandemic, this statement holds true, but certainly takes on additional weight. It feels mandatory for us to lean on technology rather than impulsive. So each device in this series acts as a barrier between people who are attempting to get to know each other better through subtle physical contact. So the absurd nature of these devices asks the viewer to consider how interactions such as these might become what we prefer from interpersonal interaction. These objects fill the spaces in between, exposing our vulnerabilities as they protect us from one another. And they prevent people from experiencing one another through subtle physical contact or other sensory experiences, such as becoming acquainted with the uniqueness of someone's odor. I question how our growing need to edit, streamline, and remove vulnerability from communication will affect our ability to empathize with our conversational partners. It's through our mistakes and our errors that we learn about ourselves and others. And if we strive for the most efficient or comfortable way to communicate, will we be missing out? So, which brings me to my final project that I'll share, which is I look forward to seeing you again or for the first time. So on March 1st, 2015, I printed out the list of everyone I was friends with on the social network Facebook, and I proceeded to make a small palm-sized vessel with the intention of giving them to each person on that list who had a personal face-to-face exchange with me. I'll place it in their hand, which is going to replace the device that would otherwise be there. So there's over 600 vessels in the collection. And the project is a situational device that I've designed to help me, or rather force me to step outside my comfort zone or practice social interaction I'm asking those in my social network to help me. Social media has become the perfect device for me to stay connected with the people in my life, but from a comfort of my own home. I can obsess over work and school, all while I feel involved and validated and supported and changed by my online network. I can half-heartedly maintain friendships in Wisconsin, where I'm from, while I put very little energy into making new friends in my new home of DC. So each vessel is stamped with the name of each friend, so their first initial and then the last name that it was on their Facebook profile the day I printed the list. And I've begun handing them out to my friends as I've seen them in person. So far, I've handed out about 150. In spring 2019, I was able to exhibit the work in my home state, Wisconsin, and as a part of like a visiting artist series where I went to undergrad at UW-Milwaukee. And I gave away about 100 or so just during that week. And I saw people, for the first time in like 15 or sometimes 20 years, like grade school friends. It was pretty surreal, but super uncomfortable too. So before these vessels are sealed, so the two-part vessel, it's hollow on the inside, and before it's sealed, I put a message inside of it, and I've kept all of the details about that message a complete secret. The message represents the curated nature of social media, but when my friends come to pick up their gift, we have an unscripted conversation. So this object is now connected to this moment in time when we were together, and to receive that scripted message, they actually will have to destroy the object. And then lastly, each of these shelves has a unique QR code on it. So that's revealed when the vessel is given away. So I have like an app for that, that it like links it automatically. And this way people who come to the gallery can see who picked up the vessel and also see what it looked like. So yeah, I have a lot of feelings about this project. It scares me and it certainly brings me out of my comfort zone. I often am like, why did I do that to myself? And there seems to be like endless layers to unpack as it goes on, but I'll leave it at that for now. There I am. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lucy. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Oh, cool. All right, so next up we have Scott McCarney, who's teaching a photo class this week. And we have Maggie Seinfeld here, the assistant, to introduce him.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maggie Seinfeld. I'm the Photo 2D Mixed Media Special Topics Assistant, and I'm here to introduce Scott McCarney, who's teaching our bookbinding for artists and photographers course. And Scott McCarney considers himself to be a sculptor as well as a bookbinder and photographer. Scott uses nature to create and form. He has been an avid gardener for 40 years and takes it just as serious as his binding, and he uses book arts as digestible teaching lessons for workshops. So please welcome Scott McCarney.
Thank you, Maggie. And Kelly, if you're out there, thank you too. So what I decided to do was to kind of walk us through a binding that I did right at the beginning of the pandemic of the lockdown. I had been asked by a friend who is another friend of a woman who publishes this encyclopedia of inspiration. It's I think it's a quarterly or maybe, I don't know, maybe an annual, but it's a series of books that each have a specific theme, and it's usually some sort of a craft orientation. I mean, some of them are ceramics and botanica, but then there's other ones like, you know, feed sacks. So it kind of is all over the place. But he, what's done, Todd Pattison, who's my connection, is a conservator at the New England Historical Genealogical Society in Boston, and he is has the publisher send him unbound versions of these books, and then asks binders and artists to do sort of what would be, you know, thought of as like fine bindings, I guess, of the art of the books. So, and this one was quilted, which I have a kind of because bookbinding and textiles are quite well related in that way as well. So it's a really, as you can see, it's a very thick book. It's very colorful. And, but when you get the, what are called F&Gs, or fluid and gathered sections, they're basically what it comes off the press out of the folding machine and then is towards the bindery. But the way that we get it, it's all untrimmed and of course, certainly unbound. Usually they are, they're very nicely smice sewn and covered and sold by subscription. I mean, it's you can't find these in a store. And I guess she has an incredible list because, you know, they're very difficult to find after they're published. So what I had done, I had chosen what's called a Greek binding, and which is, and that was absolutely no connection with the hall where I'm teaching in, which is down the street here. But it is related to a Coptic binding, which is an unsupported exposed spine binding. And the spine of these books, because of the way the print, I'm going to go back, the printing goes, you can see this diagonal, are put together so that the binder can keep all of those sections in order so they don't get mixed up in the process. So what I had done was, since I was going to have the spine exposed, kind of aligned these collation marks and then repeated those along the back. And then when I straightened up the block, you could see where we have these sort of diagonals that were becoming more of a decoration rather than just an indication for the for the collation. This was I guess towards the end of April in 2020, and I had a sewing machine set up. I was making cloth face coverings for friends and people. So everything was sort of set up in order to make this cover, and I decided on a traditional quilt pattern. It's called a crazy quilt because of, I mean, here we were right in the midst of this crazy time that who knows what was going on and what was going to be happening. So I had created this pattern and then did a sewing into a book cloth, which is it's a sized cloth, so it's got a little bit of dimensional stability to it. And then remove the drawing, which took a lot of time, but left with a sort of a blind and almost like a blind embossing, but it was the stitching. So it's almost like on a quilt when you get the back of the quilt. Sometimes you can see the stitchings, but you don't actually see like the colorful front. So it's sort of like turning the book inside out, because the inside text was very colorful with illustrations, but the outside was very subdued. And again, very much reflective of my feeling at the time. So this is the box set up here with the sewing station's position and the cover also pierced. Now, this particular binding is interesting because you're actually sewing from each cover towards the middle, and so you're basically sort of doing two bindings rather than one. And also, this particular kind of sewing means that you are sewing, each station has its own thread and its own needle. So at times it can be a little bit of a kind of a rat's nest when you're putting this together. So the idea here is once you get the two halves together, then you put them side by side. And the finish of this is to actually do a little figure-8 stitch that binds the two together. So it's really this kind of an amazing structure that is that I've really not been able to find much information about, unfortunately, historically. But it is sort of related to the Coptic, which is a very well documented form. So you can see here a close-up of the headbands, which are a more traditional Coptic headbanding here. I must say that this is the first time I've ever done this binding, so, and probably the last, but you can see sort of this wonderful kind of figure-8 that brings the two together, and the sewing kind of comes into the middle. It's really quite a wonderful thing. Oh, another thing is I chose the colors, the cyan, magenta, and yellow for the threads, which are the process colors that are used in offset printing. And it's reflected in the foredge of the book here, which are the color bars that the printer uses in order to check registration and, like the viscosity of inks and such. So again, it's kind of like the color decoration sort of oozing out of the book rather than actually being alluded to with the cover. So the inside of the covers, I used some press sheets from a book that I made and I said this to my students today, and they said, oh, we weren't even born yet. Okay, it was 1998, called Far Horizons, and it was a book that was a quilt. It was a sort of a digital kind of collage of images from sort of a combination of panoramic images along with photographs of my own garden in Rochester, New York. So it's kind of interesting. It's this format. It's called a snake format, which allows you to see the book as just a single spread, 2 pages together. And then you can sort of spread this out into more of a fold type book, in which you can begin to see the panoramic images that are sort of embedded in the back of the patterning itself. I don't know if I mentioned that the title of the book, Far Horizons, is also the title of the pattern I used to create the collage works. So this is the beginning of the press sheet, how it's sort of just cut and folded in order to fold out into a flat sheet. And so this is beginning to allude back to the whole idea, of a quilt top and how everything kind of an overall pattern, because all the little edges of the sheet itself connect with the next, like another sheet that's next to it. So this is the wallpaper edition of the book, which was printed on a much lighter stock, and with it's packaged as 12 sheets, and you can wallpaper paste this on the wall, and you end up with a 7-foot square kind of quilt top, as if you would have with a true antique you're interested in displaying rather than sleeping under. So thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so next up we have Ken Burton in the wood shop this week, and the assistant up there, Kat Nash, to introduce him. Yay, Kat. Go ahead.
Hello all, I'm Kat Nash, the wood assistant, and I'm here to introduce Ken Burton, who is teaching an introduction to woodworking. Ken has been woodworking for 51 years and began making boxes from his father's scrap wood. This past year, he became the senior editor for Woodcraft magazine. He's written 5 woodworking books and countless articles. Before Woodcraft magazine, he taught public school for 26 years and brings his teaching experience to Peters Valley. Welcome to the stage, Ken Burton.
Thank you. Let's go back far. Nice to see you all here. I'm going to put the lighter on.
Yeah, just don't flip the
Just
switch.
don't turn the lighter on. So what Kat said was true. I have been working with wood for a long time. My father believed that his 6-year-old son should have a real set of tools. And so I promptly cut myself with pretty much everything, including the hammer. But eventually, 50 some years later, you get better at it. But like most woodworkers, I know at least, if you want to make any kind of a living at this, you end up doing practical things. This is a library I built, a few years back. It's fun work. It's not, doesn't really enrich your soul. I did this for the most memorable part of this project was when I brought the drywall in to do the soffit above. And the homeowner had cleared out her living room very nicely so I could work in there. I set the drywall in there and look in her eye, like, you're not going to cut that in my house, are you? And I said, well, I thought I was. What's the matter? And we cut that stuff. There was a mess everywhere. Apparently, she and her husband had used a circular saw to cut up the drywall. And drywall, if you don't know, is basically 2 layers of paper with plaster in between. And it cuts very nicely with a nice slit on one side. You just snap it in half. So there's your lesson for tonight. So that project led to this one next door. And I was working my way up the block. Yeah. So this, and I actually built the chair too, but this I did for some of my favorite clients who were my parents. And Dad insisted on doing the mantle, and it was like, come on, you got to do something better than that. But more lately, I've been thinking back to, this is a book that came out as I was getting started woodworking in the early 80s. There's a fellow named James Krenoff who wrote about being more of an artist than a cabinet maker. And he talked about making cabinets that weren't about function so much as they were just about being cabinets. Made some wonderful things. So he was pretty big influence at that time. And I started making cabinets that weren't necessarily practical. They don't hold a whole lot of stuff. So this was a jewelry cabinet. And the point was kind of based on an owl. And I actually made this when I was teaching in high school. And the kids thought it was based on a coffin. But the idea was to make something that looked as good open as it did closed. So here's, whoops, did I miss it? I missed it. There it goes. So there's a necklace in there to kind of give you some idea of scale, and a little almost useless drawer underneath. And picking up on the triangle theme from that, there's a little nightstand. And then this is another wall cabinet that came up, inspired by a ceramic artist, actually. I have a picture of her stuff in a minute. So, but the little apostrophe, if you will, the dark piece down toward the bottom is a little drawer that slides out right through the doors. So, oops. I keep missing things. Oh, that's okay. There are two slides there, or two pictures. So you can see that it opens up and there is space inside, just not a lot. The woman who actually purchased this, I wrote a list of all the materials I used, and that's what she keeps in the drawer. So, this is a ceramic piece. This is from an artist named Rhonda Searlock. And I had a gallery for 3 or 4 years. And she was one of the artists we carried, and just doing these wonderful collage sculptural pieces. This next one, this is another little chest of drawers. Again, fairly useless. It hung about this tall. So if you really wanted to put stuff in them, it was kind of hard. The green piece, and this is similar to what we're doing up in the shop right now, is to make a piece of relatively inexpensive wood that can be painted, and then highlight some of the doors in the top of it with nicer material. The desk I show because after this was another commissioned piece. It's kind of Chippendale-esque, and I made that, and my father said, "Wow, you can make real furniture." So thanks, Dad. So Kat mentioned that my current job is as editor of Woodcraft magazine, and this was a piece I did for the magazine about cutting dovetails. And nearing the end, this piece is actually down in the gallery. This is, I guess, my most recent one made earlier this year. Again, picking up on the idea of a drawer that comes through the front of the cabinet. So I wanted to incorporate some words as a drawer as well as Wordsmith. Not much of a poet, but this one, my little poem seemed to work. And it says, boards joined at their ends, containing space and treasures and memories, both real and imagined, holding in the darkness until the doors open and the dark spills out. Little detail shot. That's patinaed copper on the front of the drawer face. So that's a series of kind of how this came together. It started out just as a sketch and then moved over to cardboard to work on the proportions. Then the doors in action, and glue up of the cabinet. You can never have enough clamps. Thank you.
Oh, fun. Awesome. Thank you very much, Ken. Next up, we have Nick Schwartz in ceramics, and who we have Grace Kerr here, the assistant, to introduce him. And this might be weird for a second. Yeah. I don't know why it happens that way, but it does. Okay, go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace, ceramic assistant. So Nick was born in Manhattan, New York. He grew up in a family embedded in the music industry and was surrounded by artists for much of his childhood. After graduating from university, he traveled to Japan for an apprenticeship. After return to the United States, Nick moved to Northern California and received a grant to build a community wood kiln. Nick was a circus owner, and now he is a music executive, fireman, and of course, he makes ceramics. Let's welcome Nick.
That's better. I know. Let's see if I can figure it out.
We're trying something a little bit techy here. So I'm going to play some music that my father produced back in the late 60s. I'm now the
That's what we got.
conservator. If we can get it on there.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to let the slides play. I'm not going to do any talking. This is the
Oh,
place
that's
I lived. This is my process and a whole bunch of photos of work that I've made, friends and family. So
Good
yeah,
to go.
music going and see what happens.
Oh, look at that.
Nice work.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Nick. That was fun music. Okay, so next up we have Sam Salvati in the blacksmithing studio. And here to introduce him is Sean Fitzsimmons. Oh God.
At Sam's request, I didn't write anything, so I'm speaking from the heart today. Sam Salvati, really talented bladesmith, blacksmith, all around great guy. He's an alumnus of Peters Valley. He once held the illustrious position that I now hold of blacksmithing assistant. A great place. He met his beautiful and lovely wife, Crystal, here, and now he's the new father to a beautiful baby girl, Leona. He's taught me about 95% of what I know about knife making and 100% of what I know about sword making. He's a real mentor, answers any question you have, great guy, and he's the sword savant himself, Sam Salvati.
So I'm like all swordsmiths, super technologically illiterate, right? Kind of comes with the territory. There we go.
Yeah, that kind of works. Yeah, perfect.
I'm filthy dirty all the time. It doesn't, it's just how it is. I don't really have slides because I'm computer illiterate. When it comes to swords, you can look at all the pictures you want online or in books. You can go to museums, and the glass is always like super frustrating. Not that my swords have anything to do with museum originals or anything like that. The stuff that I brought is kind of like what I call sketches in steel. So like there's some class demonstration pieces as well. You know, I drew as a kid before I had the opportunity to kind of get into forging. Once I did, kind of never looked back. I was always upset about the non-physical aspect of drawing, right? It's 2D. You want to hold the thing, you can draw all you want, right? But holding it is actually as good as it gets, which is why I'm going to pass a bunch of this stuff around instead, because you really have to kind of get the vibe by holding it. It is sharp. Be very careful. Be aware of the tip. If you want to step out the lawn a little bit, move it around, get a feel for it. Feel free to. That's what they're for. It's exactly what they're for. Because there isn't really many sword fights kind of going on anymore. I got into swords a long time ago. My classes heard all the stories. I tend to ramble a fair bit. But I got into swords. I got into blacksmithing originally because I wanted to make swords. I was super upset when pretty much every blacksmith you ever meet was like, you know, to then 13-year-old me, don't bother, get a real job. There was a lot of that. Why do you want to make swords? Every 13-year-old kid wants to make swords. Why don't you like do ironwork? So where I got doing that, I took ironwork. Gave me a great base because swords are fairly simple to make. There's more metallurgy involved than there is architectural ironwork, but I kind of want both those paths. It's pretty cool. You'll see my pieces like a fantasy aspect. I'm like a huge fantasy art guy. I really like it. I went and saw the Frazetta Museum, like half hour away. If you're any familiar with tiny fantasy warrior novels from the 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s. It's like the best of the best. So I'm just gonna like hand a bunch of stuff out. These are all like sketches, finished pieces, demo pieces, stuff I'm working on personally. There's like a one art piece that has like an art statement that kind of goes along with it. Other than that, they're just kind of swords. So hand out. You know, most are unfinished. It's not necessarily about like the finished product, as it is the feel. Like you'll kind of feel real swords. You know, it's not this like swinging for the home run fences kind of deal. They were magic wands. Yeah. You know, you're not like this. You just kind of like touch like that. This much motion, and you know, it's the kind of thing. It's brutal. You can't really talk about swords without talking about martial arts. They're going to talk about different types of swords without understanding different types of martial arts and how the swords are made, what they're made for. This is a thrusting sword, right? And wider blade kind of sword. This is more like a cut kind of sword. So there's a wider blade to support, not necessarily a super pointy point. So you kind of see the difference. There's more than you could possibly imagine. I kind of studied every culture: Japanese, European, Nordic, you name it. So, be aware of the tips, they're long, you know, so like your reach is now extended 36 inches. So be aware who's in front of you, behind you, around you. Yeah. They're not all sharp, but just kind of treat them as they're sharp. This is like a silly piece. So like here's a bunch of DeWalt tools at work. And like the hammer was awful. So I cut the head off and like I was like, the hammer was awful, but it's a good sword handle. It's actually made the blade, the guard or suba is like a reproduction from a 17th century original. It's a lot of fun. Significant pieces, like like any other artist, like I don't think anybody has ever worked completely as a hermit in a cave in a vacuum, right? So you're a product of who your teachers were. This is a significant piece, one of my apprenticeship pieces I did. I was lucky enough, like you always hear like apprenticeship, that word bantered around. I took it very seriously, sort of like how tattoo artists kind of take apprenticeships these days. It's pretty serious kind of contract sort of deal. Good, don't swat with the sword. That's good. If you can tell, I hate speaking in public in front of a bunch of people. So like this was like a major piece that I made with my first sword making master, a guy named John Lundemo. He's like an hour away, just south of Middletown. Recordings. That one's sharp, be careful. You know, like being in blacksmithing, you put, you know, blacksmithing and sword making together. So there's a guy, again, you know, nobody works in a vacuum. There's a guy in Atlanta, Georgia, and a guy named Michael Dillon makes these dope skulls. So I kind of practice and make them. I kind of make a reasonable facsimile. If you find him on Instagram, he's got like way cool work. Makes like big ones, 90-pound solid steel. Does like big work. Some architectural iron work, and then of course a sword. So this way. Yeah. Again, you know, it's super okay to be super excited about this. It's, you know, humans have had and used swords longer than they haven't. So you think like the age of guns was maybe like a 200-year type deal, right? Swords were around for thousands of years. So there is a primal switch that'll kind of get kicked off. Just kind of let it fly. Out there though. I was not here at Peters Valley, but for the second or third class, I was the first guy to teach in the United States European style sword making on a classroom level. So I kind of brought that out. I don't know any other way to say it. And I can do every kind of sword, you know. So again, that was a significant sword because my master John, he was a cool guy. Worked for a company called Baltimore Knife and Sword. I live in Baltimore now. They made swords for Renaissance fairs, had dealers in like every Renaissance fair in the whole country. There's a Renaissance fair, you know, in the summer they're up north, in the winter they're in like Florida, right? Talking, not personally myself, but like the crew there, 4 or 5 guys, we all made probably about 70 pieces a week. So like we filled a box Monday through Thursday, shipped it out. It sold Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we got a list on Monday. So you had to learn to make. Yeah. It's dope. Yeah. So like you had to, you know, what's the old sayings like good, fast, and cheap. Pick 2. If it's not good, if it's good and fast, it's not cheap. If it's cheap and fast, it's not good. You know, like if it's whatever you can, right? So you kind of learn to make any style of sword because we made every style of sword. And you learn to make it good, at least a reasonable facsimile, and fast so you can make a profit. So I approached it from a business. This is a class I taught at the New England School. It's like a Roman gladius. That one's super sharp. It's cut me a bunch of times, like everything else. I don't just make swords that are fairly impractical. I also make knives. Everybody's got a kitchen knife, right? I feel like I should pull out a sport, but I do make kitchen knives and high-end cutlery. Let's start over here. They'll all make their way around. Just keep the train rolling. What's that? Oh yeah, I got the whole collection. So like I've been into sword making, at least for me, pre-internet, which is like a huge vacuum of information. It's easy to take advantage of like every amount of information you ever could, you know, entire museum collections online, all that stuff. This was like go out and find that guy who's a sword maker and like go to his shop, drive like an hour and a half every day, one way to his shop. Sometimes he was so drunk that you didn't learn anything that day. Sometimes you'd show up. Yeah, sure.
So is there a reason why like it's kind of like
Fancy stuff.
okay.
Yeah, London was yeah.
Maybe it's a technical thing.
No, I mean you could incorporate. You could call that what's called a ricasso, which is the area between the edge and the guard. It's extended from like usually this big to that big. So if you were to like parry a sword in combat, if that never happens, or it should never happen, that's where you would parry it because it's a more solid block of steel. So London was a great guy. It was like a crazy experience. You think of like going to meet the crazy hermit on a mountain. That was John. He's like a rock and roll guy. He had a collection of holographic Jesuses, Spice Girls posters, rock and roll all the time. I saw him fillet his hand open once over 3 tendons, and I drove him to the hospital. And after I wiped down the sword from skin and blood and put it in a box and shipped it to the customer at the UPS store, and he had his hand wrapped in a towel and drip blood everywhere. So like in sword making, obviously there's no shortage of weirdos, you know, the good kind. So he's got clean, you know, he's a fairly clean guy. But from him, I learned a bunch of stuff. you know, like had an aesthetic. He was an aesthetic guy. He didn't forge, so you didn't get like that forging aspect. So he ground, and you know, there's like a grinding versus forging argument in bladesmithing, but it ain't no big deal. It's the same thing. So he was a stock nickel guy. Taught me to grind. Taught me about how swords should look cool. They should be inspiring. He's an incredible artist. Super one of a kind guy. We had a huge falling out, but it was since reconciled. He's a cool cat. So I learned, like, you know, kitchen knives and stuff. This is like combat knives. You know, we've been at war for God 30 years, as long as I've been alive, whatever. So like combat knives are a big thing, right? And like cooler wood stuff. Yeah, just it's exciting. I get it, but just step out. That's all. Go buck wild, but just step away from everybody. You know, like hair club for men, right? I'm not just like I don't just make swords. I'm my own customer. Why I originally got into it is because I wanted swords, but you know, I wanted like high quality stuff. This sword's probably 10, 15 years old. It's cut everything under the sun, except for like, you know, people. Yeah, it's like you name it, fruit, trees, bushes, you know, Japanese style, yeah. So it's not traditional Japanese construction. It's like what they call neo-tact. It's like tactical Japanese. It's kind of stupid, but it's built like a brick. It's built like a tank. It takes a beating. I have a cool story with that sword. You guys know Under Armour, the clothing line. So I worked at a makerspace, which is like a gym but with tools. And the CEO of Under Armour, Kevin Plank, not such a nice guy, but his kid would come around and hang out at the makerspace. So he was like, "Wow, is that a sword? You know, this is the son of a billionaire. Like access to literally everything, whatever you want." So I'm like, "Totally." He's like, "Is that a sword?" I was like, "Yeah." "Is that a real sword?" I was like, "Yeah, it's real. This is probably Encounter. He might have like super antiques in a collection, or his dad does." So he's like, "Can I see it?" Absolutely, right? You know, he kind of put the bill for the whole place, but also, you know, he's a nice guy. So I was like, "Do you want to cut something with it?" And he was like, you know, flies in a chopper around Baltimore, DC, you know, you name it, he's done it, right? Keys to the Kingdom, Prince of Baltimore kind of stuff. So I was like, absolutely, let's go cut some water bottles, right? Classic, like, backyard cutting thing. So I was like, you know, Under Armour's a sports kind of deal. I'm not a fan, it's pretty flammable. So I was like, hey, it's not like, you know, you're not swinging like a home run. You don't go down and up to try and hit upwards. You chop from your right ear to your left ankle. Set a water bottle on an aluminum stool, totally connected with it, full bore home run. Sent the chair flying 10 yards. Son of a billionaire goes like this. Bow, turns his back to you, drops the sword and goes, "Oh!" So it's like, cool, I just killed this kid. The sword just broke and just, you know, ate him alive. But I mean, it's a tank. I built it like a tank. It's there to like take that beating. Put a dent like that deep, a full bore cut dent into the chair. He got it on the second try. It's pretty funny. I have a video of it somewhere. It's on my iPad. So like cool stuff. When I was the Peters Valley assistant here, Dick Sargent was in charge of the studio, and he was kind of just like, "Did you shovel the studio? Cool, do whatever you want." So I had a chance to like prototype a lot of ideas. This was like a cool piece. Prototyped in my own shop after the apprenticeship here. And it's all forged from one solid piece of steel. It kind of embodies a lot of the techniques and stuff as far as like what a sword should feel, how it should feel. Along with like a little bit artistry stuff. So it's like, you know, you have like the rough forged bit and then the gemstone of the polished blade coming out of that. So it's like, you know, rock to gem kind of a deal. Not an artist. So that's a cool piece. That was like part of the one piece play set where I tried to make a collection that was all forged from one piece. It had no outside materials other than the steel itself, but still didn't feel like a bar steel. It felt a little more creative, a little more alive. This is like a big leaf spring on a truck. It's not sharp because it bangs around. You know, most of the stuff I own. I sold a lot of swords. You just never get pictures of it. Architectural ironwork, gates, fences, railings, fireplace tools, all that stuff. But this stuff is cool because I don't feel bad about it. Fingerprint it up, feel it, put your hands all over it. I've never done the whole get it. I will do a scabbard, and I did a belt once. So it was like the whole wearable deal. I've kind of like put stuff together into kits. It's like tactical stuff where like you buy like a bandolier style, like put a sword off the hip with like a leg strap. It's pretty cool. You don't really get the opportunity so much. It's all about your client base. I like to make swords for fun. Architectural ironwork fairly paid the bills. Welding really pays the bills. So like I go out and I weld all day. When I had a shop, I'd come back to my shop and I'd make swords for myself. Customers here and there take commissions, but you can tell people to hell if you wanted to. You know, if they had some wacky idea you don't want to make. They didn't really kind of understand what a sword should be. You didn't have to take their money if you didn't want to. There's like the duality of like, what do? Do you want to be a full-time artist? Do you want to be somebody who works a job all day and then does art in their spare time? You know, till one pays the bills and the scale's down, whatever. I've had the opportunity to be able to do pretty much all the dream jobs in blacksmithing and sword making, which sounds wild, but it's totally real and the opportunities are out there that you can imagine. When I worked in the makerspace, the guy was like, hey, we want a blacksmithing program. And I was like, cool, I don't want to do this like a half-ass type deal. Is there any way that we could like make this a real program? Like you want a real program? Slides in an American Express gold card across the table. And I've had that on 2 occasions, believe it or not. So that was a blast. I wrote that curriculum from scratch, 43 classes. I built every single class from the bottom up. And there were some real killers in there. I was that close, 2 years I ran that program. I was that close to having a sword making class there, which is a 5-day, 6-day class. So it's pretty wild. I'm running low on time. You guys can keep passing this stuff around. Take pictures, absolutely. I'm super cool with it. Like this is what you're feeling now is the experience that swords are meant to elicit. Like you should feel that wildness. Swords and knives, so on and so forth. That one is sharp as hell. Be careful. Yeah, totally. I think there's some trees and bushes down by blacksmithing. If you want to come by anytime during the week, there's always something available to go trim the trees, for sure. So, pass them out. I know how many there are. I also make tools. So like I make tools for bladesmithing and blacksmithing. Start the handle myself. Do all the woodwork, make a wedge even.
Right, I'm just going to finish up for those who are on Zoom here. Thank you everyone so much for being here. Thank you to all of the instructors for sharing your work and your time with us. What? Yeah, you're the last one. Yeah. And everyone who is here in person, have fun with swords. Everyone who's on Zoom, sorry you can't play with them. You missed out. Thank you everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you so much for tuning in. We would like to thank our sponsors for making programs like this possible. If you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to receive more like it in the future.